She deserves it more, honey, Mom said, not even looking up from the stack of gourmet cupcakes she was arranging on the tiered display stand. Jessica's always been more dedicated to her studies. You've always had other interests. The casual dismissal stung worse than if she had slapped me. I stood in my parents' kitchen, my medical school diploma still fresh in its frame, trying to process what I had just heard. Mom, we both graduated with honors. We had the exact same GPA. My voice was steady, but my hands shook slightly. I don't understand why you and Dad would pay off all of Jessica's loans, but none of mine. Audrey. My mother sighed, finally looking up at me with that familiar expression of mild disappointment. Your sister doesn't have a wealthy mentor like Dr. Fleming taking an interest in her future. You've always had advantages Jessica didn't. I almost laughed. Dr. Vivian Fleming was my research advisor because I had earned that position through 80-hour weeks in the lab while Jessica was skiing in Aspen with our parents. The advantage had been working myself to exhaustion, while my twin sister received our parents' unwavering emotional and financial support. So, I'm being punished for finding my own mentorship opportunities? I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. My father walked in, putting an arm around my mother's shoulders. No one is punishing you, Audrey. We're just being practical. Your sister needs more help than you do. You've always been more resourceful. Resourceful. The word they used to justify never attending my undergraduate research presentations while flying across the country for Jessica's volleyball tournaments. Resourceful. Their explanation for why Jessica got a new car for her 21st birthday while I received a gas station gift card. Tomorrow was Jessica's debt-free celebration party. My parents' idea, of course. They had invited extended family, her friends, even some of our former professors. The invitations read, celebrating Jessica's achievement, as if graduating medical school debt-free had been her accomplishment rather than our parents' financial decision. I need to head out, I said, finally gathering my bag. Early shift at the hospital tomorrow. Will you still make it to Jessica's party? Mom asked, concern finally entering her voice. Not for me, but for how my absence might affect my sister's special day. I'll be there, I promised, though the thought made my stomach twist. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Fleming. Need to speak with you urgently about the Patterson Fellowship. Big news. I stared at the screen, a cold realization settling over me. My parents' favoritism wasn't just unfair. It was about to become publicly humiliating, and there was nothing I could do to stop what was coming. Before I tell you what Dr. Sterling did next, tell me, have you ever been punished for being too strong while the lazy sibling got everything? Tell me your story. In the comments. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Chicago smelled like expensive lilies and old money. My parents, Gregory and Cynthia, had spared no expense for this coronation. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto 300 guests, illuminating the lie they were all here to celebrate. At 26, I was an MD-PhD candidate, a neurosurgeon in training who spent 18 hours a day mapping the most complex organ in the human body. But in this room, I was invisible. The spotlight was trained entirely on my twin sister, Morgan. She stood on the dais in a silk gown that cost more than my first car, beaming as my father tapped his microphone. He looked the part of the benevolent patriarch, holding his champagne flute high. To my daughter, Morgan, he announced, his voice booming through the speakers, who has proven that hard work and fiscal responsibility pay off. Tonight, we celebrate not just her medical degree, but her incredible achievement of graduating entirely debt-free. She is a beacon of what this family stands for. The room applauded. I stood in the shadows near the service entrance, my grip tightening on my own glass. Fiscal responsibility. That was a rich way to describe spending $400,000 of stolen money. I didn't feel the old sting of jealousy, though. That part of me had died the moment I found the digital trail. Now, I just felt the cold, clinical detachment of a surgeon preparing to cut. I caught the eye of the man standing near the orchestra pit. Dr. Richard Sterling, the chief of surgery at my hospital. He was known as the Shark for a reason. He didn't just walk into a room. He annexed it. He nodded once at me, buttoned his tuxedo jacket, and walked straight up the stairs to the dais. My father paused, confused, as Sterling stepped into the spotlight. He didn't ask for permission. He simply reached out and took the microphone from my father's hand. The feedback whine silenced the room instantly. Forgive the interruption, Sterling said, his voice smooth as velvet, but heavy with authority. I'm Dr. Richard Sterling, chief of surgery, and I couldn't let this night pass without adding to the accolades. My mother, Cynthia, smiled nervously, clearly assuming this was another tribute to their golden child. She nudged Morgan forward. I am here to announce that the Collins family has produced a singular talent, Sterling continued, turning his back on Morgan to look directly at me across the ballroom. I am proud to announce that Katie has been awarded the Vanguard Fellowship. A ripple of whispers broke out. The Vanguard was legendary. $250,000. Sterling clarified, letting the number hang in the air. Full debt forgiveness. A research grant reserved for the top 1% of neuroscientists in the nation. My father's smile faltered. This wasn't in the script. But more importantly, Sterling said, turning back to my parents, I want to propose a toast to Gregory and Cynthia. My parents straightened up, their egos inflating again. Thank you, Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming lethal. Thank you for refusing to help Kaiti. Thank you for paying off Morgan's debts while leaving Kaiti to drown. Because of your absolute neglect, you forged a survivor. You taught her that if she wanted to eat, she had to hunt. You made her the best surgeon I have ever trained. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. To show her gratitude, Sterling said, pulling a thick, cream-colored envelope from his jacket. Katie wanted you to have this. He handed the envelope to my father. Gregory took it, his hands trembling slightly, forcing a smile for the crowd. He tore the seal, expecting a card. He pulled out the document. It wasn't a thank you note. It was a single sheet of paper. A photocopy of the trust fund ledger, with the withdrawal dates highlighted in neon yellow, right next to the digital signature he had forged. I watched the color drain from his face. It happened in slow motion. The blood left his cheeks, leaving him gray and waxen. He looked at the paper, then at me. I stepped out of the shadows. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I just locked eyes with him, raised my champagne glass in a silent toast, and took a sip. Then, I set the glass down on a passing waiter's tray and turned my back on them. The air felt lighter. I walked toward the double doors, the sound of my heels clicking on the marble the only noise in the room. I had won. I reached for the brass handles of the grand double doors, expecting the rush of cool night air, the final punctuation mark on my victory. Instead, a wall of black wool blocked my path. 2 private security guards, each the size of a linebacker, stepped in front of the exit, their arms crossed. Miss, one of them rumbled. We need you to step back. I spun around. My father, Gregory, wasn't cowering in the corner anymore. He was marching toward me, and the look on his face wasn't shame. It was a terrifying, twisted mask of paternal concern layered over a core of pure, molten rage. He grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging into the muscle hard enough to bruise. Stop her! He screamed, his voice cracking with theatrical desperation. Don't let her leave. She's having a psychotic break. The chatter in the ballroom died instantly. 300 heads turned. The narrative was shifting in real time, and I felt the air leave the room. Dad, let go, I said, my voice low. Dangerous. You need help, Katie, he shouted over me, playing to the back row. He looked at the confused guests, his eyes wide and pleading. I'm so sorry, everyone. My daughter, she's been unwell for a long time. She hacked my private accounts. She forged these documents to humiliate her sister, because she's jealous. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. In seconds, he had turned my evidence into a symptom of madness. He wasn't denying the ledger existed. He was claiming I had manufactured it out of spite. Morgan, taking her cue perfectly, burst into tears. She rushed to our mother's side, burying her face in Cynthia's shoulder. I knew you were jealous, Katie, she sobbed, loud enough for the microphone to catch. But to steal from us? To make up these lies on my graduation night? The crowd wavered. I saw doubt creeping into the faces of the guests. Dr. Sterling stepped forward to intervene. But Gregory was faster. He pulled out his phone, hitting a speed dial number. He put it on speaker, holding it up like a shield. Yes, this is Gregory Collins. I'm at the Ritz-Carlton. I have a trespasser who has committed cyber theft and is currently assaulting family members. She is mentally unstable. We need officers immediately. He hung up and glared at me, a triumphant sneer flickering for just a second before the grieving father mask slipped back into place. You're not going anywhere, he hissed in my ear, his grip tightening. You think a piece of paper scares me? I'll have you buried under so many lawsuits you'll be dissecting frogs in a high school lab for the rest of your life. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, I understood the architecture of his hatred. It wasn't just greed. It was something darker. I looked at Morgan, weeping performatively in her expensive gown, and then at myself, standing alone, held captive by hired muscle. It finally clicked. The narcissist's ledger. They didn't spoil Morgan because they loved her. They spoiled her because she was useless without them. Her dependency was their drug. Every check they wrote her was a purchase of her soul, a guarantee that she would never leave, never grow, never challenge them. She was their eternal pet. But me? They hated me because I didn't need them. My independence was an insult. Every time I paid my own rent, every time I aced an exam, Without their help, it was a rejection of their control. I was the mirror reflecting their irrelevance, and for that, they wanted to destroy me. They didn't just want to steal my money. They wanted to break my legs, so I'd have to crawl back to them. You can't arrest me for telling the truth, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Watch me, Gregory whispered. Security. Hold her until the police arrive. She is a danger to herself and others. The guards moved closer, boxing me in. I was trapped. The heavy doors were sealed. The police were coming, summoned by a wealthy, respected man claiming his daughter was a thief. The room was spinning. I wasn't the victor anymore. I was the suspect. The lobby of the Ritz-Carlton had turned into a high-end holding cell. The 2 security guards stood like marble statues, blocking the revolving doors, while the hum of the party behind me dissolved into a buzz of scandalized whispers. My father, Gregory, was putting on the performance of a lifetime near the coat check, accepting condolences from confused guests, shaking his head as if he were a martyr bearing the cross of a prodigal child. I leaned against a pillar, my arms crossed, watching him. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt the cold, hard clarity of a diagnosis. They called me resourceful. It was their favorite word. It sounded like a compliment, but I knew the taste of it. It tasted like ash. 6 months ago, at 2 a.m., in the residence lounge, I had opened an automated email from the bank, managing my grandmother's joint trust. Notice of account closure. I thought it was a glitch. I logged in, my eyes burning from 18 hours of surgery prep. The balance, which should have been $120,000, money intended to pay off the loans my parents refused to cover, was zero. I didn't scream then either. I just felt a phantom scalpel slicing through my connection to them. In the lobby, Gregory caught my eye. He stopped pretending to cry for a second, just long enough to shoot me a look of pure venom. He mouthed the word, ungrateful. Ungrateful. I almost laughed. I remembered the forensic audit. It took me 3 days to find the mechanism of the theft. It wasn't a hack. It was cruder than that. They had lifted my digital signature from a car loan cosign document I'd signed when I was 21 at Jeddah. I paid for myself and pasted it onto a wire transfer authorization. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had stolen my identity. They had worn my face to rob me. Morgan was sitting on a velvet bench near the elevators, dabbing her eyes with a napkin, checking her reflection in her phone screen to make sure her mascara hadn't run. She looked tragic. She looked expensive. I remembered confronting them in their kitchen 4 months ago. I had laid the printouts on the granite island. My mother, Cynthia, hadn't even looked up from her salad. Katie. Stop being dramatic, she had said, stabbing a cherry tomato. We didn't steal it. We reallocated it. Morgan found this beautiful condo on the lake, and the market is so competitive. She needs stability. You're different. Different how? I had asked, my voice trembling then in a way it never would again. You're resourceful, Gregory had said, pouring himself a scotch. You always land on your feet. You'll work extra shifts. You'll get a grant. Morgan isn't like you. She needs a safety net. You don't need help because you're strong. That was the moment the daughter died, and the surgeon took over. They had punished me for my competence. They had taxed my survival instinct to subsidize her mediocrity. I pushed off the pillar and checked my watch. 9:14 p.m. You should sit down. One of the guards grunted at me. Police are 2 minutes out. I prefer to stand, I said, my voice flat. Gregory walked over, emboldened by the impending arrival of the law. He leaned in close, smelling of expensive cologne and rot. You're going to lose your license, he whispered. A felony theft charge? No hospital will touch you. You'll be nothing. You should have just stayed quiet and let us handle the money. You were always too smart for your own good. I am smart, I agreed, meeting his gaze. That's why I'm not worried about the police. You should be, he sneered. They're coming for you. No, Dad, I said, allowing myself a small, razor-thin smile. They're coming for the person who committed wire fraud. I didn't call them to turn myself in. I called them to verify the crime scene. He frowned, confusion flickering behind his eyes. He didn't understand. He thought he was the only one with power, because he was the only one willing to lie. He forgot that in a battle between a liar and a forensic audit, the paper always wins. I was resourceful. They were right about that. I had used every ounce of that resourcefulness to build a trap so perfect, so legally airtight, that they wouldn't even know they were caught until the steel jaws snapped shut. Blue lights flashed through the revolving glass doors. The cavalry had arrived. But they weren't his cavalry. They were mine. The revolving doors spun, admitting 2 uniformed officers into the climate-controlled tension of the lobby. Officer Miller, a man with the weary eyes of someone who had seen too many domestic disputes in too many expensive hotels, took the lead. His partner, younger and sharper, hung back, hand resting near his belt. Gregory didn't wait for them to approach. He rushed them, shedding his dignity like a snakeskin to assume the role of the victim. Gregory lunged forward the moment the officers arrived, painting me as unstable before I could speak, claiming I'd stolen documents, harassed guests, and hacked his accounts. Morgan backed him up, tearfully insisting I was obsessed. I stayed silent and let the lies stack. When Officer Miller finally asked for my ID, I didn't reach for my purse. I reached for a slim folio strapped to my thigh and introduced myself calmly as Dr. Kaidi Collins, a neurosurgical researcher. I handed him a court-sealed forensic audit, subpoenaed 3 days earlier. The documents showed $400,000 siphoned from a trust in my name, routed through my father's shell company, and into real estate. The bank affidavit confirmed my digital signature had been stolen. That wasn't a family dispute, it was wire fraud. Gregory panicked, then pivoted, insisting it was a joint trust and therefore civil. Miller hesitated. Civil disputes meant no arrest. That's when Morgan smiled and revealed the money was already gone, used to buy a Lake Michigan condo in her name. She thought that ended it. I pulled out the second page. The court order froze the property under a constructive trust. Because it was bought entirely with stolen funds, the condo was evidence. Legal title had already transferred to me. Morgan realized too late that she hadn't bought herself a home, she'd bought me one. Gregory tried to backpedal, but his own admission sealed it. The wire crossed state lines. Miller reached for his cuffs. Gregory Collins was arrested for federal wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. As they took him away, he begged me to remember he was my father. I reminded him he'd stopped being that long ago. When the lobby finally emptied, the weight lifted. The title transfer notification appeared on my phone. I deleted my family's contacts without hesitation. They always said I was resourceful. They were right. If you've ever had to become the villain to save yourself, type freedom.